Hi, welcome back everybody. This is my first attempt at a lecture that I'm going to do virtually. Um, this first part one, I'm going to go over logistics, just some of the details of how we're going to do things, and talk a little bit about the readings. First though, I just want to say welcome back. I hope you're taking care of yourselves and loved ones. I know that this is stressful, converting to online courses. We'll figure it out. If there's something that's not working for you, reach out to me. I'm available for chat on Teams, email. We can do phone calls. We can do video calls. But we can work through any details of the course. To me, there's no reason people can't still be successful this semester, and I will make sure that we can figure out how to do that for you. All right, a little bit about logistics, but this is in more detail on both Teams and Blackboard. So every week, here's kind of what you need to do. There are the weekly Blackboard assignments for homework that are due each Sunday, just like before. There's usually an article to read and a discussion board to post, and then you have to comment on someone else's. You need to keep doing that. And I know maybe a few people fell behind over the extended spring break, so you need to get caught back up and be doing those postings every week. There's also the big assignments. Those are also on Blackboard. The field lessons, the observation journal, those kind of big assignments. But as I've communicated through email, there's alternatives available, and you can read the alternative descriptions on Blackboard. Some of you were sort of in the middle of assignments or had finished one or two of them. So if that's you, I've been trying to email people individually based on what they've got done. If you think that one of these alternatives shouldn't apply, or you think there's something that's not fair about it for your situation, just communicate it with me and we can come up with a plan that works. So then during class time, and how we're going to think about attendance is there are going to be activities posted on Teams. These are going to include warm-ups from your peers, and we'll have a little bit of a backlog of those to get through because, again, there was a delay. And it will also include activities I post, like the Little Houses activities that you're supposed to do on Desmos for this week. The goal is that you finish those by the end of class on Thursdays of whatever week it is, by the end of our class time. But you don't have to actually log in and do, say, a video version of class. You can do it at your own pace. I will be available. I'll be online during class times to answer questions, either through chat or video or whatever way works best. But I can also set up other times to meet if people prefer. All right, let's talk a little bit about the readings. You read a little bit about the high school, or you read the high school standards, and you looked at a variety of different areas. A lot of people pointed out they're organized differently. So the high school standards are organized by topic, like algebra or function. They're not organized by grade, which makes them a little more flexible, but it can also make them more confusing, harder to know what to focus on when. People pointed out there's a lot of different symbols, and some of the language is more complex. So that's sort of one of the trade-offs there. I want to remind you of the goals I have for you in reading the standards. I'm really just hoping that you're going to be familiar with them, you know how to navigate them and get around and find things in them, so that when you're in the classroom and people are talking about the math standards, you know how to find them, how to look things up, how to work with them, and you have an idea of how they're organized and how they develop over time. I'm not expecting that you'll have a detailed understanding of every single standard at every single grade. I'm not sure that any teachers really have that. It's something you'll work on as a classroom teacher. You'll get more comfortable with them, and you'll develop more expertise with the ones you're teaching, but it's an ongoing learning process. You also read about tracking, or more explicitly about how we can detrack our classrooms and why it's important to detrack classrooms and schools. These articles that you read, you got to choose either an elementary or a middle grades article. They came out following this book. This book's called Catalyzing Change in High School for Mathematics. And it's obviously focused on the high school grades. The articles you read are, what does that mean for middle school and elementary school? And this is a big push from the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. And there are versions of this book that are going to be coming out that are middle grades focused and elementary focused. I wanted to just point out one or two kind of big picture things about tracking. The first one being that students know. Some of you talked about, well, I wasn't super aware of it. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but if you talk to students, especially in middle or high school grades, when there start to be different courses, and you ask them about those courses, they know what they mean. But also if you ask them in elementary grades and there's like, say, a Red Robins group or a Blue Jays group, they know what those groups mean, and they know what it means to not be in one of those groups. Overall, the biggest thing I want to communicate is that tracking is really harmful to kids, both in the high tracks and in the low tracks. And if there's a typical track, then in that track also. Kids in the high track feel pressure to perform. They feel like they can't ask questions. They think if they make mistakes, they're no longer going to be high or gifted anymore. Kids in the low track often feel they're not good at the topic. A lot of you talked about confidence issues in your Blackboard postings. And they don't get access to the same kind of mathematics. But more importantly, both groups learn out on losing from each other. If math is all about different ways of thinking, multiple strategies, and being able to make connections across strategies, then by not being together, these kids don't see each other's ways of thinking, and we all lose out on that mathematically. Perhaps most importantly is that tracking sends a message that it's something you're born with. You're either good or bad at math from birth, and there's not really anything you can do about it. A much better message is to communicate that whether or not you're successful is going to depend on having fair opportunities and working hard at that topic. That you get good at math by working hard at it. It's not something you're born with, because if it's something you're born with, you can't really change and improve it. But if it's something that you develop through hard work, then that is something we can work on in the classroom. There's a video available about thinking about giftedness and the effect it can have on kids. I'm not going to play it now as part of the lecture, but there's a link on Teams so you can watch it after you finish this part of the video. All right, you also read Building Responsibility for Learning in Students with Special Needs by Karen Karp and Philip Howell. They talk about two big myths about supporting kids who have disabilities or are identified for special education services. The first one is that students who are identified for special ed have to be spoon-fed information, or otherwise they're not going to be able to learn it. That their thinking is so different from quote-unquote typical students in the classroom that they can only get this very direct memorization-based kind of mathematics teaching. Now, if we do that, then those kids aren't really learning mathematics. In our class, math is about problem solving, critical thinking, coming at things in multiple ways. If we don't provide that to students in special education, then they're not really getting the same mathematics. They're getting a very different type of mathematics than the rest of the school or the rest of the students. On the other side of things, they talk about the myth that students who are in special education just need good teaching. If we just do good math teaching, it's going to work for everyone. And this is the myth they kind of tackle more in the article about how good teaching is not necessarily enough. There are other strategies you're going to need to specifically support and individualize instruction for students who need it. So they go over 4 big strategies, and you read about those in the article, so I'm not going to go over them in detail, but removing specific barriers. If I want students to focus on mathematics and they can't because they have difficulty with reading or difficulty with accessing the tools I have, then that's a barrier to the mathematics. I need to think about how to rework the task. I want to structure my environment in a way that's not distracting or helps kids focus or helps them move from stage to stage of the activity. I need to think about how I can incorporate time for practice, that after kids are starting to understand the idea, how do I incorporate time, especially extra time, to practice and solidify those ideas for students who need it? And how am I sure to be clear in the purposes of the task and the expectations for how to participate? Now this is they talked about this in the article also, but I really want to highlight it, that the key consideration is what's the key math I want my students to learn? What kinds of thinking do I want them to engage in? And how do I keep that there? I'm going to think about these supports and strategies I can use. How do I use those strategies without removing that math thinking, without simplifying the math thinking? Because if I do that, they're no longer actually working on the math I wanted them to work on. All right, so that's the end of part 1. Go ahead and watch the video and then go ahead and watch part 2. They're all up on Teams.